Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of A New Way to Win. I'm your host, Reeba Magulick, the senior founding partner of the D8 Group. The D8 Group was founded to help organizations and private businesses better understand the federal acquisition process, find ideal fit government contracting opportunities, and to leverage our firm's business development resources to strategically but ethically position for a win. Our show's goal is to provide a platform for meaningful dialogue and engagement between the federal government and the federal contracting industry. We are so honored today to have in our studios Retired Colonel Bobby Saxon, the Deputy CIO for the Office of IT at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, otherwise known as CMS. Most recently, Bobby served as the director of CMS's Office of Emergency and Preparedness and Response Operations. And he started at CMS actually in 2017 as the CTO of healthcare.gov. Bobby is a retired Army colonel who worked in the branch's headquarters, G3, G5, and G7, providing IT services for operations, planning, and training. Again, we're so honored to have you today, Bobby. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today, Reeba, and thank you for that introduction. Glad
Absolutely. Oh, we're so excited. So, Bobby, I'm going to start off with an easy one for you. So, my first question is, could you briefly describe your role today at CMS for our audience, and also the top objectives that your team is working to accomplish right now?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. You mentioned briefly that I started off at CMS as the CTO for healthcare.
Right.
It was a phenomenal training ground.
Oh, I'm sure.
Understanding the organization and also understanding the real connection to stakeholders because of what we did at healthcare.gov. I moved from that job to the EPRO office as the Emergency Preparedness and Response Operations office, really in response to an OIG audit that we had that called out continuity, disaster recovery, and emergency management in CMS.
Okay.
And I loved that job, was minding my own business one day when the COVID popped up and
gracious.
the pandemic, and that job took on a whole new level of steroids for everyone in all
surely.
of CMS. But I was fortunate to be selected as the new deputy director at OIT about 5 months ago and came into this job. And since I've joined the front office of the Office of Information Technology, I have been focusing a lot on data, on Medicare Modernization, human-centered design, and really the issues of how do we connect our IT more closely to our business owners,
to
our stakeholders.
Very interesting. Now, what's even more interesting about this is that we believe Rajiv, the CIO, he invited you into this role as a change agent, it seems. You've been at CMS for 4 years compared to so many that have been there 20 plus years at the agency. From your perspective as, somewhat fresh pair of eyes coming in, what is the most surprising thing to you about the agency? And what, in your opinion, is needed to keep it moving forward?
Well, speaking about the change agent piece, I think I have always been a change agent for the places that I have been. And I really want to thank Dr. David Bray, who was the CIO at the FCC years ago, for bringing me under his wing and really embracing the change agent, because that's who he is, and he really allowed me to kind of blossom even when I was a lieutenant colonel in the Army station at the Pentagon.
Nice.
And Rajiv and I hit it off when he first came on board at CMS. He's a guy that came from USDS. He had been in industry prior to that. And he thinks innovatively, thinks creatively, and thinks strategically. And we were very much like-minded. So when that opportunity came about and I was selected for the role, I was very excited. And I do believe that one of the reasons I came into the role is to be a change agent. But to be a change agent to an organization that has been around for many decades.
Correct.
Has a lot of staff members that have been there for many decades.
Yes.
I have one team member now that's been with CMS for 44 years.
Oh, wow.
That works with me. And she, like many of the other folks that have been there for a long time, one of the things I love about working with them is how passionate they are about the mission.
Oh, my.
And people sometimes think you have to have recently joined an organization to be a change agent or to understand technology in an innovative, creative kind of way. But the folks that have been at CMS for all of those years, combined with the youth and the new blood that comes in, that's a really good mix.
Okay.
And
a lot of diversity, you're saying?
I'm almost certainly a lot of diversity.
Okay.
And I'm excited about going in and embracing that group. I think one of the things that I typically do when I go into an organization is I try to find the way to empower the people that are there.
Okay.
How to get their creative juices flowing, how to enhance communication and collaboration, and then challenge that group to be to embrace risk. Because when you start talking about change, many people see that as risk.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can get people who have the knowledge, the relationships, get them empowered and get them to embrace the risk, I've found you can get a lot accomplished.
That makes a lot of sense, Bobby. What's even more interesting about this is that you came into this new role right at the beginning of the pandemic, pretty much, in May of this year. How did this increase or change the challenge of taking on a new job, which was probably a challenge in itself? And how did it affect you working your way towards the mission?
In many ways, I feel that I was very blessed because I had been in a role for over a year working emergency preparedness and response operations. So in that role, I had to develop good relationships with the senior leaders across all of CMS.
Okay.
So as you know, CMS is broken into centers and offices.
Right.
So by the time I was selected for and then moved into this role as the deputy for OIT, I had already developed, as a part of that ePro role, many of the relationships. So it helped me in the transition because when I came to CMS as in the Office of Information Technology, my first meeting, first day, was via a Zoom meeting because there was no going in and seeing folks. Now, I knew many folks in OIT, but I didn't realize how many I did not know.
Right.
And fortunately, because of Zoom, and I think that's the critical piece here, really video teleconferencing. I won't call out just Zoom because there are many tools out there that we use as well as other organizations use. But being able to look someone in the eye, even though it is a video conference, is hugely beneficial.
Absolutely.
Most of the calls and meetings that I had remotely for the first 3 years that I was at CMS, we were doing via a conference call, but we weren't making facial contact. And
Right.
when we started being able to do that, and so it's actually made it pretty easy on me. And there are a couple of senior leaders at CMS that have come in after I have come in, not in the Office of Information Technology, but in other offices. And I've seen them quickly adapt, quickly develop relationships. And even these people that I've never met, I now feel like I have a personal relationship with them, and I've only ever met them on a Zoom.
It's so interesting. And just to diverge for a second, same thing in my business. Like we've been doing all of our client meetings, we make it a point to turn on the camera. And I was just sharing with my husband the other day, it's as darn close as you can get to having a real face-to-face interaction. It does the job. I mean, obviously nothing ever replaces meeting somebody live, but I think it's effective, especially for geographically dispersed parties.
It is effective. I am looking forward to the day that we are able to get back in the office.
Same here.
I don't know that I want to go back in the office every day from now on.
I know. I think that's what people are discovering, right? Like, hey, we can still get the job done and not have to.
So true. But I do want to be able to get some personal interaction. Those like we were having conversations earlier before this interview started that were just more general kinds of conversations. It's much more difficult to do those when you're in a work environment. You jump on a video, you do the work piece, you jump off, you miss the small talk in the hallways and before and after meetings and so on.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, Bobby. How would you say COVID-19 has impacted the business of the agency and its workers? And what impact specifically would you say COVID has generated from an IT cybersecurity standpoint?
Well, I think that the pandemic has actually made CMS stronger as an organization.
How interesting.
This is clearly in our wheelhouse of things that we should be experts at. And there were many people across the organization that could speak this language very in an articulate way. But many of us that could not do that previously now have a much better understanding. And we also know the people across the organization that have those kinds of skill sets. Going full-time, and we at CMS never went full-time telework. We went maximum telework. And maximum telework and full-time telework.
Does that mean outside of normal business hours? Is that what that means, that you're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
You could say that too, but it was more that we strongly encouraged everyone to telework. But you could still come into the office, and there's been a small contingency of people have been in the office practically every day since the pandemic started.
Interesting.
And we are now having more and more folks that are coming back into the office. But what's really happened is we've realized just how much work can get accomplished from your home or from wherever you may be currently working at that moment. And we, and I'm sure like most organizations, had a tendency to almost overlook those that were working from home, because we've always had a small percentage of people that teleworked for CMS. But
one of those out of sight type of things.
But when you jumped on a meeting and you dialed them in, typically those were almost afterthought kinds of, it's like, oh, is there anyone on the phone that has anything to say? Whereas now everyone's on the phone and everyone's on the video.
Exactly.
And everyone has an equal ability to provide input, and that's been a huge advantage. I have found I save 2.5 hours a day by not having to drive to work. I live in Arlington. I work in Baltimore at the main office there, and so hour up, hour and a half back home every day. But I use that 2.5 hours for work. And now, because I live kind of in this virtual world, it's not uncommon for me to, be checking emails, because I've got my laptop set up all the time.
It's
at
right
the
there.
house.
Yeah.
And I jump on it. Find so, let me catch up on that. And I was less inclined to do that on my work phone.
Right.
But now with my laptop always available, I do that. And I know many, many other folks that do the same
I
thing.
agree. Yeah, I mean, same situation in among our network, seeing the same thing. People are so much more efficient. The flip side of that is that boundary, right? The boundary's getting fuzzy, and some people are getting very, very stressed out. And there's implications down the path of mental health and stress and happiness and all those things.
I don't have a lot of detailed information on that, but we've had those conversations in our office as well about with being there working all the time, and then when you do have 2 or 3 or 4 people in a home that need to be online, and you're normally very stable internet connection, it's got 4 people video conferencing on it simultaneously. You also mentioned ask about security.
Yes,
we have been very fortunate at CMS that we have not really encountered any challenges with going to maximum telework. We've got a great security team that does a lot of hard work inside the organization. George Hoffman, who is the other deputy CIO, he has been the acting CISO now for about 18 months.
Okay.
And so he brought a wealth of knowledge to the position. He had formerly been the acting CIO at CMS. And we have been fortunate to be able to go through that. And I say fortunate, I only because I don't want someone to say, oh, let's go out there and challenge them.
Exactly.
And we just continue to hope that our defenses are in place that are working well, or we continue to work well.
That's great. That's really good to hear, Bobby. Bobby, I wanted to ask you, so many of our listeners who tune into the show, they are listening for ways that they can help CMS with some of its biggest challenges. As you look to the future, can you tell me what your top 3 biggest challenges are, and where would you like to see industry roll up their sleeves and come in and help?
Well, I mentioned a little bit up front in this conversation, data, data and analytics. And I don't think this is unique to CMS.
No.
I think it is every agency in the federal government, to be quite frank, and when I was in the Army as well. But our ability to handle our data better and turn that data into valuable information that we can utilize to serve our stakeholders better. CMS is a highly distributed organization, and we have about 25 components underneath the umbrella of CMS. And each one of those components has their own budget. They have, in many cases, some of their own IT people. We have 1,100 IT people at CMS out of about 6,200.
Wow.
And only 450 of those work in the Office of Information Technology. The rest are spread across the different components. But because we are so distributed, sometimes we have a tendency to create solutions that are very specific to that component as opposed to serve the greater good of the enterprise.
So you mean too tailored to one specific...
Because an organization will have a budget, they'll have a problem, and they soon will have a system.
Okay.
And that system may not be totally aligned with...
It may not be speaking to the other systems.
It may not speak to the systems. It may not even be aligned because it's solving one specific problem. But that problem may exist in 5 other places across the organization.
Okay.
So help in that area. That's
Okay.
something, when you're asking about industry, how they can help us, it's really, we need thought leaders to come in and help us kind of see the art of the possible for the future, and then develop a real plan. I'm not a fan of people coming in and telling me, hey, this is what the future should look like.
Yeah.
And telling me really in some cases what I already know. It's that actionable plan to get to that future I think is very important. Another really important topic is Medicare Modernization specifically.
Okay. Yes, of
we
course.
have already headed down that path, but there's more work to do. I'm not exactly sure of the exact number of mainframes that we have in CMS, but it's 8 or 9, I believe. And those things can be big and bulky and hard to get away from.
Right.
And so how do we get away from those in a way that is positive for the organization? How do we move forward and allow us to really kind of rethink how we deliver that capability for the organization using more modern technology like the cloud, for example?
Yeah, and I know that's a major initiative. Do you have a specific timeline in mind that you're shooting for?
Well, we are actually already headed down the path, but we haven't headed down the path of moving off of those mainframes. But we are now nibbling around the edges on Medicare modernization, and where's the lowest hanging fruit that we can go tackle and get it out of data centers or off of mainframe and get it because it was built more recently.
Sure.
And get it into the cloud. But ultimately, Medicare modernization will probably have a significant impact on every piece of technology that we have that supports Medicare today.
That makes sense. No, thank you for sharing that, because I know industry is always looking to see where they can help. Bobby, video podcast, we were discussing a little bit about this earlier, but it's such a great medium to reach a large portion of your stakeholders, constituent, team members, that person, several layers deep in the organization that may or may not have an opportunity to attend your conference or, speaking engagement. I'd like to ask you, what would you like to take this opportunity to convey or request of your colleagues or stakeholders, knowing that, hey, this will be a broad way for people to hear the message directly from you?
Well, believe it or not, it's not about technology. I have found that most of our technology problems are not technology problems. They're problems that involve technology that were created because of culture or because of communications challenges or lack of collaboration or a fear of risk. And so if anyone in my organization or across your audience hears me, I'd like for them to think about how they can enhance communication, how they can enhance collaboration in their organization, how they can look at risk and not be afraid of it, but look at risk and go, how do we mitigate that risk? That way they can continue to go forward. And then look at your culture inside of your organization, and is this the culture that you want in your organization? I like to joke about when I was working on my graduate degree, the one class that I got a B in was organizational culture change. And if I had the opportunity, I would go back and take that class over and over and over till I got 100 in it.
Right.
Because it is literally the most important class
If only
that I
they
took.
would tell us that in business school, right?
If
Pay
I had
attention.
understood how important it was, but organizational culture is critical.
Well, it's great. It sounds like there's a lot of positive things happening despite coming in at an unusual time. So really commend you for the things that you're doing.
Well, it's
Bobby.
a great organization. I'm glad to be there. And but it's also the kind of place and the role that I have now where I can go do quality work that needs to be tackled and ultimately hopefully make a difference, for all of CMS, but with the teams that I work with and so on.
That's awesome. So I always like to ask this question. Can you share, would you be a little specific in sharing, without naming any names, your most positive and your most negative experience with an industry member coming in and trying to share their value proposition or their specific technology or product offering with you? And how would you advise them to do it if you had to step into their shoes?
Well, as it works out, I have previously been in their shoes,
Okay,
not
there
in
you
the
go.
government
Perfect.
industry, but when I left active duty military service and transitioned into the reserves before going back on active duty after 9/11. But during that period, I actually sold technology. And
So you have been in those shoes.
So I have been
Precisely.
in their shoes, and my boss sent me to a Dale Carnegie sales course.
Oh, yep.
A long time ago. Anyone who understands Dale Carnegie knows I'm very old because of that statement. However,
You're not that old. I've been to one too.
well, thank you for helping me feel better there, Reeba.
Or maybe that means that I'm old.
One of the lessons.
We're both in good company, Bobby.
Well, thank you very much there. But one of the valuable lessons that I learned from that is that it is really critical to understand the needs of your customer. And so many times where I have a disconnect when someone comes in, a potential vendor partner comes in to see me, and I am very open. I have vendor partners in all the time when we have no specific sales goal, but it's more to help me understand the technology, help me understand their offerings, because I don't know when I might need something.
just like
and I
to
want
be
to be
informed,
situationally
yeah.
aware of it. But understanding the needs of the customer then takes me back to spending the time to do that as opposed to immediately trying to sell me a solution. When you walk in my door and you tell me that you have the thing that fixes my problem, when I know you don't understand my problem, I know you're just simply trying to sell me.
Gotcha.
But if you'll invest in really understanding my problem, and some of my vendor partners that I've worked with have been in my door many times before they were able to find a contract that they could come answer our specific needs for us at the organization.
But it's worth the time invested,
But
right?
the time that I invested in them, the time they will invest in me, they will get an opportunity to really take their skill set, because they've dealt with many other customers, and they hopefully genuinely have seen my problem somewhere else and can help me get past my problem. So really, that's really not me listing a negative and a positive, but it's the approach that you take when you walk in the door to try to understand how your services align with my challenges. Because the closer we can get those into alignment, the more opportunity there will be for your organization.
More fruitful for both parties. That's great. My final question for you, can you give us a little glimpse into what adventures are in store for you next? What's down the path for Bobby Saxon?
Well, I am blessed to have just taken a new role, so I hope to be there for quite some time down the road. My real goal is to solve problems and to make a difference. That's what drives me. That's what gets me up every day. That's what gets me into the office. Is there a challenge that I can bring my skill set to try to overcome that challenge? And fortunately, in the federal government, there are lots of those kinds of challenges out there.
Yes.
And I am someone who is not afraid of risk. I am someone who really works hard on the communication, the collaboration side. So that normally means there's plenty of opportunity for me to do the things that I do, that I like to do, and that I still enjoy coming to work. Whenever that day comes that I don't enjoy coming to work, I'm going to retire, because I'm retired from the Army, as you know, but I'm going to retire the second time. But hopefully that's no time in the near future.
Anything on a personal front that you'd be willing to share about who is Bobby Saxon?
Who is Bobby Saxon? Bobby Saxon is a proud dad. I have 3 children, and
nice.
my wife and I have his and her children. They're all great kids, but 2 of them recently I got to commission as Army second lieutenants.
Wow,
one last year who graduated
congratulations.
from VMI, and one just a couple of months ago who graduated from Virginia Tech.
Oh, how proud you
And
must be.
the VMI lieutenant is in Iraq right now,
Oh.
and the Virginia Tech lieutenant is getting ready to go on active duty.
God
And
bless
my
them.
wife, God bless her, she is a school teacher. For those of you who don't know anything about school teachers out there, it has been a hard time to get to go from teaching in a class every day to the transition to full-time virtual learning. But my wife is an amazing teacher, and she does a phenomenal job doing it. So I'm just a blessed man all around.
Amen. Yeah, I would just take this moment to say the same thing. Thank you so much to all the teachers out there. We know what an incredibly hard job you're doing right now, and we as parents really, really appreciate you. And Bobby, we appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much, Reeba.
We hope you'll come back.
The great experience today, so thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me share some stories about CMS.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. And we want to thank our audience for joining us today, and just want to remind you to please like, comment, or share below. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.